Welcome to Writing Science Fiction is Hard. I'm James, and today I wanted to do a review on a novella that I just finished called Orders of Magnitude by Yuval Kordov. I'm trying to remember how I found this book. I think it was recommended to me, maybe on the Military Science Fiction podcast Discord. But this is a pure indie published book, and I have come to feel that when you find an indie book that, and by indie what I mean is that it was self-published, although independently published or indie published has come to mean the author did everything. They wrote the book, they got it edited, they got people to read it and give their thoughts, beta reading, and then they published it, typically on Kindle Unlimited on Amazon, although that is, could be anywhere, Kobo, Smashwords, any of the various markets that are out there. And then they have to do any marketing that's involved with it too. Like, how are they going to generate word of mouth to get sales? And the thing about it is, those are different skills. So, a person who can write something really interesting and good is not always the person who can market well. And so, you might get things that are marketed well and get to a lot of people, but they aren't always the things that when you come across them, you're like, oh, I wish more people knew about this. And for me, that was this book. The only thing I'll say is that to start with is orders of magnitude. You probably need to say that to yourself 5 times fast to remember it, because something about that title had a tendency to slip out of my memory. And I had to go back and look at my notes and find the conversation where it was mentioned so that I could just find the novella. But anyway, Orders of Magnitude is a military science fiction novella set on a nearish future. I'd say probably at least 100 years in the future, because it deals with a relatively well-developed moon colony. But this is a world where there has been some kind of nuclear war that has devastated the Earth. And in the aftermath of that, the Catholic Church has become the primary governmental force, at least for most of the characters. They are all part of the Catholic Church. They all follow its strictures. They use titles from the church. I am not Catholic. I am not practicing of religion right now. I was raised as a Baptist. There have been times in my life when I was very involved in the church. So, a lot of the things that are brought up, I understand what they're talking about. I certainly understand the language of faith and having a crisis of faith. And that's what the main character, Samuel, in this story is slowly developing a crisis of faith. He was raised Jewish. His parents were killed in a nuclear attack, and he survives and becomes basically is raised by the Catholic Church and becomes a member of their elite, a member of an elite military unit within the church, working directly for the Vatican. So one of the things that this gives you, and that's kind of the difference. See, I am not, because I'm not religious, or not Catholic, I should say, when I read this, some of the aspects of it are sort of like reading a fantasy novel to me. Like, I don't feel the weight of having a vicar or something sent by the Pope. Like, I understand that's important, but I don't feel it deeply the way that some readers that come to this may feel this and really be imagining what the church might look like in the future. And that is really interesting to me. One of the things in The Expanse that I felt didn't get explored as well as it could have is the fact that the Mormon church is the only element of humanity that are, like, realistically trying to build an ark ship and leave Saul. And it becomes kind of a joke in the series when the ship is stolen from them and then used by other people throughout the series. And the authors, like, or James Corey, I should say, the single author, they show a lot of the trappings in the church, the imagery, things like that. And it's just sort of a backdrop without really digging into, like, these are the people that were actively trying to move the human race out of Saul. Now, you could argue, are they the right people to do that? That's kind of immaterial, right? If they're the only people who are doing it. um, so so anyway, um, these questions are interesting to me. The this It opens basically with the unit, the small unit, approaching the lunar colony, Serenitatis, and it is an excellent exercise in tension. You don't really know what's going to happen. You know they're in a small ship, and Kordov is setting up all the elements of what just make a good, tight story. There is a small unit. There's the leader of the unit. There is also a secondary leader of the unit. And this is an element I find interesting. You read it in a lot with stories about like the Soviet army or any sort of army where you have a commander, and then there's also sort of a purity leader who is there to oversee what the commander does. And so you have a leader who's not only trying to win a battle, right, and keep their people safe and all the things that someone in the army would, or the US Army might be used to doing. But now they have this person that's also part of the KGB or the party, or in this case, the church, looking down on them as well. And so judging everything they do, there's the very real possibility that they could win this engagement and fail on a political level and still be sent off to the gulag, right? So Samuel is trying to balance those two conflicting priorities as he's thinking about the mission that they're about to undertake. It opens with the possibility that the shuttle they're flying in could be shot down by the colony's own defense systems. And so there's a lot of tension in the opening scene. That tension really plays throughout as Samuel starts making decisions, sending people to different parts of the colony, and also having to make decisions within his squad because he has people that are well trained and people that are brand new. And it really comes down to all that they have received from the lunar colony is a radio message that doesn't make a lot of sense, and they otherwise don't know what happened to any of the people. Everything appears clean, empty, and there's that overriding mystery of what happened. I came to this thinking of it would be more like Dead Space, the game, and Dead Space pivots on the idea that there is an alien relic that was found that infects people's minds, and there's a lot of insinuation that it's like a religion, but it basically turns people into demons, and they overtake colonies. There's a whole colony system spread throughout space, and so when you show up to fight it, you are, basically coming up against demons and trying to figure out the base mystery of what happened here. Dead Space often has it kind of nerfs the main character because the idea is that you're more of just a technician. And one of the tropes in the series is that you're fighting with a rivet gun, and then you can improve your weapons as you go along. But there's definitely an underpowered feature as you move against the demons. These Marines move into this situation with the best armament that is available to them at the time: weapons, armor, communication systems. So they're at the top of their game in a lot of ways. As the story progresses, Samuel starts to reveal more things about himself, and that's kind of done through the mechanism of his interactions with the father that is with them. And you come to find out that, like I said before, he was very young when a nuclear blast went off. He does very much remember his Jewish faith, and it's kind of expressed through his relationship with his mother and his memories of her. But he is also trying to reconcile that with, his new faith of being Catholic. And there are catechisms that he says as they go along. He goes back to his rosary beads when he's trying to calm his mind. And these are all tools that, regardless of whether this is a religious story or not, it does play into, just how good military science fiction works, with really getting into the core of how a character is going to respond to a situation and try to just calm themselves so they can make the right decision. So the story, they move through the lunar colony. That's basically what drives the elements of the plot forward. And they start getting attacked. People start disappearing. More information comes up about the people that were on the colony and how they were communicating back with Earth. Kordov does a good job of just setting sensory detail. Well, there aren't a lot of sensory details on the on the in the colony, but there are a lot of visual details, and just the sort of eerie feeling of every time you look up through a skylight and see the Earth, and then look back down and see how dead the moon is. It really, you get a great sense of that throughout this novella. So it progresses to the point where finally why this is happening is revealed. I don't want to give too much away about it, but the character is being driven toward a decision that is justified by his own internal crisis that is happening. I don't want to give that away because this is a short book and there isn't, if I give that away, it's going to undermine the whole thing. So I don't want to do that. Okay, let's talk about the world building. I think that's one of the aspects of this novella that makes it particularly strong. Kordov does not do info dumps. He does regressions within the character to give information both about the world and what the character is feeling in the moment. A lot of times people think of military science fiction as like one of the stereotypes is that the characters don't feel or the characters are just killing machines or robots. And Samuel is definitely not a robot. Now, there are times when he reinforces that they will carry out orders if they need to. But he absolutely feels that the difficulty in being a soldier, in exercising violence, there's the constant worry that they're going to have to kill colonists depending on what they're told to do. And that plays into the tension between him and the father who is coming along with him. He doesn't know what the church is going to ask him to do, and so he's feeling that tension in him the whole time. And there's a history of other operations he was on that he never explicitly says what they were, just that the memory of that weighs on him as they move through the scenario. There's also the world building that is kind of implicit in how what the lunar colony looks like plays out. And so as we all kind of imagine a lunar colony might be, it's connected domes. It's not underground, which is something that probably would have been less interesting. Maybe it's more likely. I don't know. I've read a lot of different things thinking about that. But by putting it above ground, we get the Earth looming over all the time because they have, big windows that can see out. There's also the added tension of a solar storm that's coming up, and so everybody's getting irradiated, and so there are multiple ticking time bombs playing out. There's the imminence of a solar storm, which means they need to get off and get away from the moon within about 4 hours. There's trying to rescue the colonists, and what are they going to do about that? And then just how this is going to play out for him if he doesn't make the right decision when having this father along with him. And the prose really serves that. I was very surprised by the quality. I shouldn't say I was surprised by it, but it's not often you come across an indie book that has the high quality of prose that Kordov is showing here. It's obvious that he put a lot of care into how he was choosing his language, how he's writing out the scenes, where he's choosing to provide information. And then when it's time to transition into action, it all makes sense. Like things aren't coming out of nowhere. There are some jumps you have to make as far as how the technology works because the story makes some assumptions. I think that the reader knows what certain things are, and in the afterword, that's something that Kordov mentions that this may have been the follow-on story from another author, a story that they had written, and I haven't found that story yet. I mean, I would say that this one it's self-contained. Like there's enough here that you can absolutely figure out what's going on as it happens. There's one scene that definitely kind of plays on the fact that you don't know how a certain tech works, and so you don't know if they're under attack or they're just stuck in some kind of advertisement. But that makes sense once it's done. And that would be, this is kind of reflected in the other reviews as well. This is a world that could be bigger. There could be more of a full novel in this world to just give the world building more room to breathe, to so the reader knows what to expect. That that's something that I would love to see more of. I would absolutely read more in this world, kind of showing, because I would love to know how the church deals with this expanded society, with increased technology, how they justify the idea, or maybe not justify, but respond to the ideas of nuclear war and the Earth basically losing its ability to support life, what that means as having dominion over the Earth, that sort of thing. There are so many different layers to that could be, explored, and I think that would all be really interesting. It's just sort of hinted at here, and that's kind of just my main criticism. It's too short. There are a lot of, this is the thing, this is the downside of novellas and sometimes short stories, right? Like in a short story, it's always a balance of how much world building to provide so that the reader understands what's happening and knows what the world is, and you're looking through that keyhole into the world, but you're not frustrating them by giving them more information or really interesting, exciting information that just leaves them like their ending feeling with the story is that I want to know more. And maybe that's the feeling you wanted to give them, but as a reader, I would like to be satisfied with that. And I would say there is enough here. It's more that it's good. So I want to know more. I want to know what this world looks like and how it operates. So I think those things are working well. And as an example of a way to maintain tension without jumping right into combat, when the combat comes, it's a punctuation of the underlying tension throughout the story, having multiple obstacles that are both internal and external. Having an obstacle in the priest, the secondary to the main mission, having a ticking time bomb built into the story. All those things work very well. I wanted, well, I don't want to get into spoilers. The thing is, like, whenever you come to like a character, you'd like to stay with them. So that's the hallmark of an interesting story, right? There is another piece of this novella which is mentioned in a lot of the reviews, and that is that Kordov wrote an afterword which talks about his personal feelings about why he wrote this story. The fact that he is Jewish, writing in a mostly Catholic world, but also that the main character is Jewish that was then raised in the Catholic Church in that faith, and so that adds interesting layers to it, and it opens the door for me at least on a whole genre that I was not aware of, and that was the other thing that I wanted to mention here. So let me find the page. So Kordov mentions that he explicitly mentions other Incensepunk authors, and I was not familiar with Incensepunk. So this is like there's a magazine, and he's got there's a lot of great fiction here. I don't want to say surprised, but the two stories that I read, I liked. They were well edited. It was obvious that the authors took care in them. Sometimes you come across an internet magazine, and especially one serving a niche, and you can sort of tell that, like, okay, this is not, I don't want to be, it's just not something I would continue reading. This is not that for me, at least. I found that the stories were engaging with ideas I found compelling, and the quality of the writing is good. I like that they've got a manifesto right at the beginning that says what it is, and I love Flannery O'Connor, so having a Flannery O'Connor quote right at the beginning appeals to me. They say that they don't want to use AI art. That also appeals to me. But the going to a deeper core of what this might be, like when you first think of, okay, a genre or writing or an aesthetic where religion is core could lead you in a lot of different places, especially in today's world. Like I just came across a Facebook post where an author was complaining about the fact that they were going to submit to an anthology that was a Christian anthology, but the anthology did not allow the, I'm trying to remember the exact word. Like basically, I had to look up the word because I didn't know what it was. But basically, you cannot criticize the Bible, or the Bible is the ultimate word of God. And so any criticism or questioning of that word is not something people of that faith, that denomination, engage with. The Bible has been interpreted and translated and uh, many times. It's also a creation of humans, so that's something that doesn't. That's one of my core problems actually with some churches. But anyway, what they say here like appeals to me. Incense punk is at its core a genre of longing. It desires a world in which traditional faiths and churches play a major role in society. Incensepunk extrapolates Byzantine and Gothic architecture styles into a modern world of skyscrapers and globalization. However, it is not regressive. It doesn't view the past as good and the present as wicked and depraved. Instead, it tries to envision what the world could look like if faith and society were more integrated. I think that's an interesting question to engage with. It says it is speculative fiction, but it does not have to be alternative history, though it could be. It could imagine a future in which the church regains the influence it once had, or where it never lost it at all, or even just the technological struggles of a small faith community. The role of the church in incense punk is more than merely ascetic, though the church can and probably should look somewhat different than it does today. So it imagines an evolving or a responding faith. That's interesting to me. I think that's something that will exist as much as a lot of folks would like to imagine a future where it doesn't or won't exist. I think that it will, and probably this integration is something that our society will continue to have to engage with, uh, whether it's Western, Eastern, or whatever. And then they also explicitly mention down here, importantly, incense punk is not a genre for hate. If a story exists just to bash any group of people, it has no place in incense punk. It's not a genre for inquisition or crusades, apologetics, or fantasies. Interactions with other religions and atheism can exist, but it should not make straw men of them, nor should stories be Christian apologetics in disguise. And this also appeals to me. I've always been of the, like, if I was going to be more active, I've had friends that were active in Christian Science or Jesuits, and the idea of actively engaging with and questioning and being critical of as a way to deepen faith is something that has always appealed to me. So that was, I liked that they wrote this here. So I don't know if I would write this. I don't know if I could do it justice, because I don't want to treat religion as fantasy. And I always, whenever a religion is created in a fantasy world, or it's an obvious stand-in for something else, I feel that it's doing injustice to the actual religion, that people believe that. And I would like to do that the honor it deserves, do their faith the honor it deserves. But for me personally, it's a thing that I'll think critically about. I don't just take a thing at face value, or what I feel is not what everybody else feels. And I think that's, people should have room to do that. So this appealed to me. So I don't know, it's something I'll think about. It's not a high paying market. They pay like $100 for between 4,000 and 6,000 words of fiction, and they don't pay for nonfiction. So it's in that kind of realm of magazines that it's a thing that exists, and it's interesting that it does exist. But if a writer is looking for paying markets, or like SEFWA qualifying markets, that I think it needs to be 8 cents a word at this point, this isn't going to work with that. But it's still interesting that it exists. It's always, whenever I come across something, like I've been reading and studying science fiction for a long time, and maybe I need to just do a search for like the various punks that are out there. I know cyberpunk, I know diesel punk, steampunk, solar punk, now incense punk. What other punks am I missing? So this is a gateway novella to a lot of other things. And I definitely think it's worth your time to check out. Whether you like military science fiction or not, it does a lot of things well. And it's obvious that the author took care with this book. Looking at, Kordov has not put a lot of things, published a lot of things, at least on Amazon, that I've found. There's more stories on the Incensepunk website, but I will be checking them out because they look very interesting to me. So yeah, if you've got other recommendations like this, I would love to read them. I'm very, I read a lot of military science fiction, and I'm very interested in ways that people are pushing that genre to do more, or to take it seriously in a way that, soldiers are not just robots, they are people. Conflicts happen within, there is context, right? There's political, there's cultural, there's economic. A lot of stuff we talk about in the military science fiction podcast, I like to see all that play out. Like the fact that somebody thought about it, and it's not just about the, you know, like, of course, it's always interesting to know how a weapon system works and, what caliber it was. And like, it's cool to blow stuff up, I guess. Um, but I like to see that somebody's really thinking about these things. And this was a book that did that. My only real criticism was that it's too short and I would like more, which is probably a pretty good criticism to have, right? So, so yeah, please let me know if you've got other recommendations. I'd love to check them out. And I think I said before, I'll put links to everything in the podcast notes and the YouTube notes. So thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you next time. Later.